Hello, welcome back to my fave fanfics. Here, I post, well, my favorite fanfictions, if that wasn't obvious. I do hope you'll enjoy them as much as I do. Please like and subscribe for more content. Without further ado, let's get started.
This is part 3 of What If Ichigo Lost His Zanpakuto in the World of One Piece. Chapter 7. Zanpakuto. 3 days went by relatively smoothly, complete with Luffy somehow managing to tie himself in a knot and Zoro, Usopp and Frankie working deep into the evening to get him untangled. Afterwards, during dinner, there had been discussion over what wonders could be awaiting them on the following island. The log may take a few days to set. Nami had cautioned them, so don't go and do anything too stupid. Like yelling loud about keeping a low profile, Ichigo contributed. Whack. What followed had been the typical chaotic dinner, before finally the day came to an end and most of them retired to bed. And now, it would seem they'd reached an island. Robin came to this conclusion sometime during the late afternoon upon hearing the usual island sounds from the ship's captain, sniper and doctor. Island. Island. The three chanted arm in arm as Robin came out from her quarters to sight a vague shape on the horizon. The plague, she noted, interrupting the three's joyous jig. I wonder what flesh-eating epidemics await us here. Wah. I'd better make sure all my medical supplies are ready. Chopper said as he hurried to the infirmary whilst Usopp proclaimed he'd already contracted the "cannot go on this island" disease. Ichigo came up onto deck to see the island coming steadily closer. With the state of the wind at the moment, it will probably be another half hour or so before we arrive, Nami relayed to the gathered crew from her spot up in the crow's nest where she scanned the island through a spyglass. Until then, make note of supplies we may need to gather. By the looks of it, this island is occupied. Ichigo watched the outline on the horizon steadily grow closer as members of the crew went about noting supplies that may have needed restocking. As they got closer, the island reminded him of an artist's depiction of ancient China. Sharp, steep mountains dominated like splashes of calligraphy over what he imagined would be some sort of settlement. However, the island's actual content was largely a mystery due to a large stone wall surrounding its perimeter. Is there any way in? Sanji pondered, observing the extensive wall. It looks like there's a small opening over there, Brook said, indicating to a relatively small tunnel that was carved through the wall. Yosh! Said Luffy, pointing toward the opening, full speed ahead. Quote. Upon infiltrating the huge wall, they saw that still there was easily a kilometer between them and the island. The island's mountains peaked endlessly into the clouds, and a rich terrain dominated its expanse. However, a definite and prominent city could be made out at the foot of a tall mountain and snuggled against a welcoming cove. They sailed onwards, a bay not too far from the city as their destination. They were there within 15 minutes. The bay was fairly small and hosted a couple of humble fishing boats. An old-looking, worn sign embodied the words, "Welcome to Zanpakuto," hung at the front of a small collection of houses. Zanpakuto, hey? Sanji noted. This probably used to be a main port, said Zoro. Or maybe it was used more before they put the wall up, Frankie suggested. I can hear music, Luffy said excitedly as a jumble of instruments thrummed in the distance. It sounds like a party. Quote. Let's see if we can dock a bit closer to the city, Nami said, and they continued to sail along the island's coast, but within the wall. As they cruised along, they witnessed numerous houses and buildings belonging to Zanpakuto's residents. The buildings were of timber and featured fine and elaborate architecture, made all the more fine and elaborate by the colorful lights and lanterns that decorated them. As they drew closer to the city, the thrumming of life only grew. It was early evening when they finally docked and disembarked, to find that behind the walls and toward the city, the island was alive with activity. Colorful lanterns dotted the lively streets, illuminating the various attractions and people. "It's a party!" Luffy cheered in victory. "What are they celebrating?" Ichigo wondered. "Apparently, this festival marks the turning of a dynasty," Robin noted. "Once the festival ends, it will be a new era for this island." "How do you know that?" Ichigo asked. "It says so on all these posters." "Oh. Alright everyone," Nami said, distributing a couple of money bags. "These are your allowances. Spend them wisely, and I suppose I can't really tell you to not do anything stupid, hey? But try not to get lost. Just stay around where all the activity is." The lot of them set out together save for Zoro, whom had opted to mind the ship for the time being. Though he had requested food and drink from the festival's markets, and was intent on handing the minding of the ship to someone else later in the night. A variety of street performers occupied the winding avenues toward what must have been the city's main square, putting on a range of displays. Jugglers, fire breathers, contortionists, and Luffy had no idea what to look at. That was until, of course, they reached the main square and he caught the whiff of something delicious smelling being cooked nearby and quickly scrambled over to one of the stalls to get his fill. The festivities continued as such for the next half hour, Ichigo and the Straw Hats taking their time to enjoy what Shangpyo's city square had to offer. However, a horn soon sounded and the square began clearing. The street performers finished up their acts and moved out of the way, and the festival attendees cleared the center of the square in anticipation of what was about to come. Ichigo and the others followed their example and looked over to one of the square's vast entrances in time to see a ship making its way into the vicinity. The ship itself was not unlike what Ichigo had seen in old illustrations of Oriental-style sailing ships, with angular-shaped sails like dragon wings and a fierce dragon as its figurehead to match. However, the fact that the ship was bounding towards them only raised more questions than it was answering. The ship traversed the land on a pair of strong furry legs positioned on either side, and was held in balance by a powerful-looking, equally furry tail. "What the heck is that?" Ichigo asked no one in particular. However, the island's local residents seemed completely unfazed over the bounding ship, as though calmly accepting it as they would a person walking a dog. Glancing over to the crew though, Ichigo saw that they too were sporting inquisitive looks. It seemed that even in this crazy world, a bounding ship wasn't something that was seen everywhere. The ship came to a halt and a man dressed in festive robes of bright blues, reds and golds came forth and began speaking to it, before turning and gaining sight of Ichigo and the gathered Straw Hats. "Ah." He smiled friendly to them. "Judging by your lack of festive attire and your reactions to seeing Hyalong, I take it you're not from around here?" Quote, "We sailed in about an hour ago," Usopp answered. "Then welcome." The man beamed. "You've arrived just in time for the Festival of Three Eves. Shangpyo is entering a new dynasty, and this first night of the festival marks the countdown to that moment." "What's with the weird animal?" Luffy asked, admiring the ship's tail which sat over where normally might be a rudder. "Hyalong is a ship that ate the kangaroo fruit. You know, he was a champion ship back in the day. However, after the fruit was eaten he wasn't the same. We all thought that since he was a boat he'd at least float. But he sunk anyway and we had to get him towed out. Oh well. He makes for a good on-land ferry and heavy load carrying nowadays, I guess." To demonstrate the man's explanation, the dragon-faced figurehead morphed into the head of a living kangaroo, which flicked its ears a few times and blinked at them. Ichigo was trying to get his head around the entire scenario. Wait, I understand how a person can eat a fruit, but a ship? A gun and a sword have eaten them, Chopper informed him. Ichigo observed the boat's legs and tail whilst searching for any words to express the oddity before him. But why a kangaroo of all things? Isn't that a bit out of place? Quote. How so? Luffy, Chopper and the robed man asked, tilting their heads in wonder. Well, everything around here looks Chinese, but kangaroos are Australian. Luffy blinked in confusion. What's Chinese? What's Australian? You don't make sense, Moon Guy. And a boat eating a kangaroo fruit does? Quote. Before Luffy could respond, a group of people leapt off the Kanga ship, which reverted to full ship form, and instantly stood in organized formation. I bid you farewell for the time being, the robed man said, but it seems we're beginning. Fire lit the streets from the various lamps and torches, the light they emitted morphing into colors beyond that of the usual fire spectrum. An array of greens, blues, whites and purples danced in the night's contrasting silky blackness, and a thrumming pattern of drums began to sound from onboard the ship. This was accompanied by an obscure, yet enriching plucking of strings and assortment of other instruments, as those who remained up on deck participated in the production and enchanting melody, bringing life to what may have otherwise been a silent evening. Ichigo noted Brook humming along beside him, the skeleton's inner musician truly appreciating the fineness and exotic harmony of the piece. The music's dynamics quietened down, and the robed man stepped forward, his voice an enrapturing accomplice. Many eons ago, before the great dragon first breathed its flame of life to the then lifeless form of Zanpakuto and her neighbors, a war raged in the great heavens. A thread of deep blue light appeared and wove through the performers, leaving behind it a trail of illumination. After a few moments, it became clear that the thread of light was drawing. With the ground as its canvas, an elaborate depiction ensued. The mountains of Zanpakuto were formed, glowing luminously as the performers seemingly moved as a merged unit. The war was a war of envy over the power entrusted to the 5 rulers of the land. In an act of counteraction, the 5 rulers cast their country's grievances away in the form of 5 rings to the ocean below. As the performers spiraled around one another in a rhythmic dance, Ichigo began recognizing the performance as a theatrical presentation of the legend Robin had read days beforehand. Of these 5 grievances, the second was a plague. And in the region of the ocean the plague festered, the island we now know as Zanpakuto was formed. The music's tempo paced up like a heartbeat. The dancers swarmed around in a circle as a select few cut across with effortless leaps, and the thread of light added detail to the mountains. The plague snuck up on us like we weren't expecting, and for many years we were its slave. The dancers interpreted the phrase by slinking down low and adding suppression and tension to their movements, as though being bound by chains. The music quickened and the light trail adopted a red color as it swerved erratically around the illustrations it had already drawn. Until one day, the music ceased abruptly, the dancers froze and the light faded momentarily, setting a tone of anxious uncertainty within the city's square. Suddenly, a ray of white light emerged from within one of the center-positioned dancers, before shock waving outwards until the entire square was enveloped by the same white light. We were freed from the plague's grasp by a valiant cure. The music restarted as a triumphant reprisal of the former piece as the dancers wove throughout one another joyously and the thread of light returned, repainting its masterpiece from before, but this time with more detail and quicker pacing. Even Zanpakuto's residents played their part by cheering and applauding. It is because of this cure we could recover. It is because of this cure we could advance. It is because of this cure we gather and can welcome in a new dynasty, a new era filled with promise. This is the reason we celebrate. And now, we have a new tomorrow. Ooh, that was an interesting show. Luffy laughed out loud as they headed back toward the ship a while later. Indeed, it was, Robin agreed, such a creative presentation of this island's history. Wow. It was so moving. Frankie blubbered as he had for the last 10 minutes. It's good to know they got rid of that plague, Usopp sighed in relief. I wonder what cure was used and who made it, Chopper pondered. I would like to find them. Quote. Maybe you can find out more about it tomorrow, Robin suggested. Nami scanned her gaze across the gathered group. Wasn't someone meant to go and swap with Zoro at some point? Quote. Oops. The sky was a dark blue color and a morning mist wafted from the ocean's calm surface. Ichigo sat aboard the deck, unable to sleep as he looked out on the watery dawn. He wasn't sure what the cause of his restlessness was. He was tired enough to sleep, but it just wasn't happening. Maybe it's because of the festival. Though surely this wasn't the case. Luffy and some of the others were far more excitable than he was. Yet there was Luffy in the men's quarters, sleeping like a rock and snoring loudly. But try as he did, Ichigo could not stop a growing sense of unease from claiming him. It was making him ill, building a foul, queasing sensation in his gut. When would he get Zangetsu back? Would he get Zangetsu back? Ichigo took this time to ponder further. He'd been gone close to 2 weeks now. Would people be wondering where he was? Did they have any idea where he'd gone? And how would he get back there? He sighed and decided to put all associated thoughts on hold for the time being, instead gazing out into the distance. He vaguely made out the island's wall, a ghostly boundary some way before the horizon, blocking the primary source of the light from the slowly rising sun. Hopefully the uneasiness wouldn't be around for too much longer. A few hours later, breakfast had been served out on the deck and the Straw Hats were preparing for the day's shenanigans. Today I want to go on some of the rides, they look like fun. Luffy said through a few mouthfuls of bacon. Also, I want to catch a fish from that pond. And jump on the bouncing thing. Quote. I'll go to the markets and get more food supplies, said Sanji. We still have enough from the last island we were at. But I want to try out some new recipes with some ingredients from this festival. Ichigo massaged his temples, fighting back an impending headache and trying to contain the queasiness in his stomach. It seemed the uneasiness was lingering. Oi, Ichigo, Zoro called over to him. You hungover or something? Quote. It feels like it, Ichigo replied, but I didn't have anything to drink last night, so I don't think I would be. Just feeling a bit crappy. You feel sick, Moon Guy? Luffy overhead. Ichigo groaned, yeah, so don't give me a headache. A leg of meat was consequently thrust out in front of him. This will make you feel better. Quote. Ichigo pondered the medical knowledge that had been passed on to him over the years from his father. No it won't. But Luffy was persistent. You like meat, right? Then it should make you better. Quote. I don't think it works that way, Ichigo responded, besides, I'm not hungry. Luffy began munching on the meat himself, mumbling something about good food. You didn't drink anything last night? Chopper questioned, taking it all too literally. That's very careless of you, Ichigo. You should always drink water and stay hydrated. Ichigo looked on as the little reindeer continued to berate him. I'll give you one of these to stop the headache from coming, Chopper offered, retrieving a small pill from a box in his medical case. Ichigo accepted it with a, thanks, downing it with a glass of water. The effects were instantaneous, and as Ichigo set his glass down, he already felt far better. Wow, he said, where did you buy those things? Quote. I mixed the medicine myself, the doctor grinned. But make sure you have plenty of water today, Ichigo. And stay out of the sun. Alright. Well, it's about time I checked this place out, Zoro said as he took a glance at the island, leapt off the ship and went to explore the city on his own. Is that really a good idea? Ichigo thought to himself, recalling the green-haired man's disastrous sense of navigation. Hey Moon Guy, are you coming? Luffy's voice called over to him. Yep. Ichigo downed the rest of the glass of water and gently clunked the glass down, before heading over to Day 2's festivities. Nami wandered through the festive city, taking the time to enjoy the sights and sounds that surrounded her. Finally, they'd reached an island where they could relax and enjoy themselves for the time being. And their timing had been excellent. Arriving at the festival's commencement and leaving once it was over. It was like it was meant to be, and she could have time on her own without one of the idiots bothering her from within the confinements of the ship, and shop in peace without being pursued by unwanted followers. Speaking of which, she had yet to see any Marines on this island. She looked down, admiring the festival outfit she'd bought herself. It was silk and consisted of a pleasant array of autumn colors, complementing her complexion and copper hair, which was currently tied up and secured with a leaf-shaped hair brooch. At the moment, they were enjoying a puppet theater. Nami watched as the puppets moved with the fake life given to them by the puppeteers whom controlled them from behind the screen, noting also that the attraction was primarily targeting children and Luffy, whom seemed to find the show highly amusing. Hey Nami, he questioned her once the show was finished and the two of them along with Usopp and Ichigo were heading toward the square. Can we get a puppet theater for the ship? Quote. Yeah, can we? Usopp probed further. Nami sighed. Just ask Frankie to make one for you. Whatever he makes will be better than any we'd have to pay for, anyway. Yosh. The two affirmed. They walked along further, passing various attractions and even stopping at a few, such as a giant slippery slide it was nearly impossible to get Luffy off, and a shooting range game that was easy as breathing for Usopp. You've won 3 major prizes, the game operator said eventually, that's enough for today. You'll run me out of business. Quote. Ow, alright, Usopp pouted. The game had been fun after all. He accepted the prizes. A large plush toy of the Hai-Long the Kanga boat Luffy was now carrying and gawking at. Luffy himself had barely managed to score himself a minor prize, a rice sweet he was currently chewing on. A do-it-yourself construction kit to make a replica of said Kanga boat, which he was really looking forward to toying with and perhaps adding some of his own quirks to. And an exuberant hat adorned with various characteristic features of Zanpakuto, which he wore positioned atop his plain white one. Ichigo had won a poster of the Emperor's right-hand man, which Luffy and Usopp proceeded to pay him out for. However, in the midst of the carnival-like festivities, Nami began to notice something odd. Struggling to place it, she voiced her concerns to the other 3. Have you 3 noticed? She questioned, there's something odd about this place. Something different to other places we've been. All the places have been so far have been different, Ichigo pointed out, but Nami ignored him. Now that you mention it, Usopp noted, there is something a bit weird about this place, but I can't figure it out. Maybe it's that Kanga's ship, Ichigo shrugged, even you guys thought it was strange. Yeah, said Luffy, or that Osan who was with the puppets. He was pretty weird now that I think about it. You're weirder, Usopp said. But he had 4 arms. Quote. There was obviously another person hiding in his cloak. Maybe more. Wow, I wonder how many people he keeps in there. Quote. At any rate, Nami said, looking down at the log pose secured firmly around her wrist, the log sets just after the festival ends. Let's hope that nothing annoying happens in the meantime. Usopp, would you come with me to restock a few supplies? Quote. The sniper affirmed, not wanting to face the consequences of resisting Nami's request. "Remember, you two," Nami called out to Luffy and Ichigo as she and Usopp made their way over to the city's bustling shopping complex. "If you want lunch, Sanji said it would be ready in about an hour." "All right." Luffy replied and waved to his friends as they left. Shearwater sat alone in the halls of his twisted labyrinth, lost in deep contemplation as he watched Zangetsu from the opposite side of the hall. His thoughts were interrupted when the rumble of a nearby stone wall announced the arrival of one of his henchmen. Looking over, he gave what could have passed as a small smile. "Ah, it's you, Potoro. What's the news?" Quote. Potoro knelt down before his master. "My lord, the sea nymphs have returned." "Stand up," Shearwater demanded. Potoro did so. "You know how much I hate being addressed as such." Shearwater reprimanded him bitterly. "Yes, my lord, Shearwater," Potoro acknowledged as he inclined his head. "Forgive me. So the 5 of them have returned, am I right?" Shearwater questioned, drawing himself to his lengthy height and brushing past his underling as he slowly crossed the room. "That's right," Potoro said as he straightened up and tried to keep pace with his master's decent strides. "Perseus is in a rotten mood, as he usually is after these types of things. The rest are pretty tired as you'd expect. They were gone for nearly a week after all. I told them they could rest for now. Knowing that lot, there were detours on the side I bet," Shearwater noted, "but fair enough. If anything comes up, we have the other 5. I make sure to only send half the sea nymph force out at any one time for those reasons. Now, as for Kurosaki Ichigo." They reached the opposite side of the hall, where the immense spiritual sword of the substitute Shinigami was propped. Shearwater ran his calloused fingers along the side, taking a moment to savor the raw power he could sense from within. "As for Kurosaki Ichigo, I've decided it's best to keep him alive for the sake of what his and Zangetsu's powers may mean to me. Conveniently he is headed here, to Adlivan, I believe. He is seeking out his Zanpakuto, but in doing so is seeking out me. Only he can use this sword to its true potential, and therefore only he can supply the final ingredient for achieving my goal. However, I am growing impatient. He was too far off for the sea nymphs to be able to bring to me, and his means of traveling here himself are not as swift as I would like. Well, at least he's traveling here at all, my low boss Shearwater. Though the process may be lengthy, it may be quicker than you think. Oh, and from what the sea nymphs told me, it looks like the crew Kurosaki's with her on course for Shanpaio." Shearwater's features curved into a grin. "Shanpaio? Well, in that case." Potoro inclined his head. "Yes, I will make it a priority." "Very well then," Shearwater concluded with an air of satisfaction. "Nonetheless, I would like to sample what I can of Zangetsu's true power." Placing the palm of his hand over the sword's vast side, Shearwater concentrated his power, emitting a light blue glow between his hand and the cleaver. At once, he felt an immense energy brush against his own, with it promising unspeakable power. Shearwater retracted his connection, instantly feeling more empowered and alive than he had in a long time. "That will do for now," he said as he turned and made his way out of the hall, Potoro at his heels. "This is it, Potoro. These powers and my own will be enough to master both worlds." Luffy and Ichigo exchanged discussion as they began back to the sunny for lunch after having enjoyed the festivities a while longer. "And what was that weird black coat thing the guy had?" Quote. "I think that was his hair." "Wow, awesome. Do you think I can grow mine like that?" Quote. "I guess you could, if you didn't get it cut," Ichigo reasoned. "I'll try it now," Luffy said as he came to a halt. Ichigo stopped beside him and looked on in amusement as Luffy attempted to stretch his hair. Whilst it didn't stubbornly stay in place or tear like anyone else's hair would, it didn't stretch as successfully as the rest of Luffy would. Rather, Luffy pulled his dark trusses until they nearly reached his shoulders, before letting it go and having it snap back into place. Ichigo laughed at the spectacle. Maybe I should just grow it, Luffy decided. They were nearly out of the city's center when a mob of people began swarming into the main square, clothed in a variety of colored garments and exchanging excited words. "Oh, a parade!" Luffy cheered. "I don't think they're a parade," Ichigo said as he observed the mass squeeze into the main square. But Luffy was busy occupying himself by making a range of excited exclamations as street performers, strange animals, and even strange-looking, but otherwise normal people piled in. "I think we're starting to hit peak hour, or there's going to be some sort of display here in the square, or somewhere nearby." "Sounds exciting." Luffy grinned as the people continued past, heading for a location to the west of the square. Ichigo was forming the words to suggest they stick around and take a look, when a strange sensation came over him. He felt his knees buckle and quickly shot out a hand to cling to a nearby wall and steady himself. "What are you doing, Moon Guy?" Quote. Luffy was hovering beside him, a contemplative look on his face as he leant against the wall, facing Ichigo. "And nothing," Ichigo replied, "just suddenly got dizzy." He straightened up only to experience the sensation once again, this time more intense than before. Once again relying on the wall for support, Ichigo tried to lose the uneasy dizziness. However, as he inhaled, a stabbing pain ripped its way through his insides. "Moon Guy?" Quote. Reaching up and putting the back of his hand to Ichigo's forehead, Luffy frowned and muttered something Ichigo didn't quite catch, before pulling out a slab of meat from somewhere and offering it to him. Ichigo waved a hand, trying to shake off Luffy's pestering attempt at doctoring, and turned in on the wall, letting it support the majority of his weight. Trying to disregard the pain, he took some deep breaths, closed his eyes and blocked out Luffy's jabbering and poking from behind. "It's rude to ignore people, you know," barely noticing as Luffy began chewing on the spontaneous meat stick himself. But all sound was fading. All sound, save for the thrumming in his ears. The long dormant yet eerily familiar beast-like presence at the far reaches of his mind, threatening to take over all control from the depths of his consciousness should he let his guard down. He was oblivious to the blood now oozing from his hand due to being slowly scraped along the rough bricks in the wall, and to the concerned composure the young pirate had now adopted. "Moon Guy?" Quote. Ichigo moved, painfully clutching his side. Something was missing. "Ichigo?" Quote. He couldn't breathe. He was suffocating, as though he was drowning in a bottomless ocean, despite the fact it was some couple hundred meters away. An immense pressure hovered over him like a wall of crushing water, and his insides lurched as he was sure it would all come crashing down on him. And then it was over. Yet one thing was missing. Something was wrong. He couldn't feel what he'd been desperately searching for the entire ordeal. He couldn't feel anything. Ichigo went to breathe in a raspy breath, but found he was unable to. All at once, the ocean-like pressure seemed to come crashing down. Vaguely aware of Luffy grabbing him as his legs finally gave out, Ichigo closed his eyes and tried to find something that wasn't there. Zanjetsu? Chapter 8. The Festival of Three Eves. You missed lunch. The utterance was short and simple and was the first sound to grace Ichigo's ears upon regaining awareness. A glance at his surroundings with lethargic, drooping eyes told him he was back aboard the Sunny in a room he recognized as the infirmary, with the ship's resident cook at his side. Sorry, he managed, shuffling under his bed sheets and pushing himself up into a sitting position. Idiot, don't apologize, Sanji snapped at him, before calmly exhaling a plume of smoke and continuing. Luffy brought you here about 3 hours ago. Said something weird happened to you. That you started acting like some sort of airhead and then passed out. Ichigo scanned his mind, trying to recollect the happenings of his and Luffy's return journey to the ship. Zanjetsu. He suddenly remembered, abruptly shuffling out of bed. Hey, Sanji cautioned, I wouldn't move around too fast if I were you. With a sigh of relief, Ichigo located the familiar presence reaching out to him. It was distant. But it was there. And that was all that mattered at the moment. I thought something really bad might have happened, Ichigo thought as the distant presence of Zanjetsu continued to radiate something akin to a comforting assurance to him. At least he's there, at least I can feel him again. Ichigo sighed and lay back down, some of his muscles cramped and sore from the tension. What's wrong with me? He questioned no one in particular. I'm not sure, said Sanji, being the only other there, took it upon himself to answer, but Chopper would have a better idea than I do. The little guy may be a bit gullible, but when it comes to medical stuff he's the one to go to. On cue, the door swung open and Chopper trotted in. Ichigo, he said in relief, you're awake. That's a good sign. Well, I'm not dead, Ichigo commented. I should have known something was wrong with you this morning. Chopper fretted, ignoring Ichigo's comment. What's wrong with me anyway? Ichigo asked. It was strange, the reindeer began, it was like, I don't know, it was almost like your body stopped working for a moment back there. But why would it do that? Sanji wondered. I couldn't feel Zanjetsu, Ichigo said, he's been distant in the time we've been separated, but I've always been able to feel him at least. But just today, I don't know what happened, it was like the connections we always share were wrenched from each other or something like that. Chopper gave a nod, from what Luffy told me, I thought it might be that or something similar. It was, Ichigo began, it felt so, I don't want it to happen again. I'm sorry, Ichigo, the small doctor said with a frown, but I can't promise it won't. What do you mean? Ichigo demanded. That sword is a part of your soul, isn't it? Quote. Ichigo nodded. That means it's a part of you. I explained this to Luffy earlier but I'm not sure if he understood. I'm sure you do though. That sword of yours is a part of you, but you've been separated and your connection is wavering. I'm not sure how things like this work in a spiritual sense, but I'm sure it's similar to physical. In which case, being separated from a part of yourself, say, if your arm is cut off, can't ever be very good for you, can it? Quote. Ichigo recalled a certain medical lesson his father had given him a while ago. The later a severed limb is tendered to after the injury happens, the less likely you're ever going to get it back. He remembered his father saying something of the like, but Zanjetsu isn't a limb, surely I'll get him back no matter how long it takes us to get to that icy breath place. I don't know, Ichigo, Chopper answered, but that episode today, when you couldn't feel the sword, that type of thing could start to happen more, before. Before what? Ichigo questioned. Chopper didn't respond. I can't keep living like this, Ichigo continued, if what you're saying is true, it's hardly even living. What if one day something like what happened today happens and I don't start sensing him again? Quote. Ichigo, Sanji warned. Realizing his outburst and intensity probably startling the small reindeer, a wave of guilt suddenly came over Ichigo and he withdrew, suddenly aware of his fever. I'm sorry, Chopper, he said, I just. It's okay Ichigo, I understand, Chopper said, placing a small hoof over Ichigo's hand, and it's okay to be scared. I'm not scared, Ichigo quickly retorted, just a little uncertain, that's all. Well, I'm not scared either. Chopper retaliated as he swiftly withdrew his hoof and put on a brave face. "I wasn't scared for you at all, Ichigo." "Right," Sanji remarked between the two of them. "I have some advice of you though, and I think it would be best if you followed it until we get your sword back," Chopper said. Ichigo leaned in and listened intently as the little reindeer began. "That mask you use, it probably isn't helping. As it is, the connection between you and that sword is already stretched. The sword and the mask are opposite sources of energy, aren't they? When you use that mask without balancing it with the power from your sword, there is probably some sort of unbalance and that can't be good." "Damn," Ichigo thought, "my wizard mask is one of my better means of fighting at the moment. Too bad if a tough opponent comes along sometime and I have to use it." Also, Chopper continued, "Whoever has your sword might be using it in ways that will harm you. That could have been what happened today, whilst your other symptoms were caused by overexerting yourself without the power of the sword to help you." "Damn it," Ichigo muttered. He hated being so helpless. Luffy paced the upper deck of the Thousand Sunny, Chopper's voice still ringing loud in his ears. Being separated is slowly killing him. Moon Guy won't die, Luffy thought to himself. I haven't repaid my debt to him. I need to help him find the Zangetsu. An exchanging of voices sounded from down in the infirmary, causing the young captain to halt his pace and listen, though most of what he heard was muffled by the layers of Adam's wood that blocked the way. "There's something I need to do, I'll go down there myself." Darting towards the infirmary like a hazard on legs and nearly tumbling down the set of stairs, he focused on the door that lay before him. Moon Guy. Luffy tore the door open and toppled into the room, almost landing on top of Sanji, before standing and locating the substitute Shinigami. Inwardly, he exhaled in relief that apart from appearing a little on the pale side, Ichigo looked okay. "Ah," Ichigo observed as the young pirate straightened himself up and began staring at him. "How are you, Luffy?" Quote. Moon Guy, Ichigo, Moon Guy." Ichigo raised an eyebrow. Luffy seemed to be struggling over a choice of what name to use. "Well, which is it?" he prompted as Luffy continued to contemplate which to use one or the other. Ichigo. "Yes, Luffy." Quote. "We need to make a promise." Quote. "Okay." Luffy climbed onto the end of the bed and sat across from Ichigo, locking eye contact with a look of determination that contrasted Ichigo's reflecting gaze of confusion. After a moment, Luffy reached out a hand. "We need to shake hands," he stated. Ichigo paused and reached out, taking Luffy's slightly smaller hand into his own. "Is this necessary for it to be valid?" he wondered. "We're gonna find your Zangetsu no matter what." Luffy yelled determinedly, "So before then, don't you dare die." "You got that, Moon Guy." Quote. Ichigo stared for a moment in lack for what to say, eardrums thrumming, before quickly shaking himself to alertness. "Of course, Luffy," he said. "Yosh. It's a promise then." Luffy chirped as the two retracted from their handshake. "Sounds good to me," Ichigo responded. Without a further word, Luffy leapt down from the bed and began to race up the stairs. He was about halfway up when he paused and turned around. "Oh, and Moon Guy," he said, "make sure you don't forget to have dinner. It's always important to eat when you're sick. And when you're not sick. And when you're tired. And when it's rainy. And when you want to eat more than Brook. And when. Speaking of which, I'd better start getting it ready," said Sanji as he stood and left the room, ascending the stairs. And just for a moment, as Luffy's voice slowly faded as it pestered after Sanji for food, Ichigo was sure he caught himself smiling. Daylight was starting to fade when Frankie and Usopp met up with Robin on the way out of the city's main square. Did you find out anything interesting? Frankie questioned her. Nothing beyond what was seen last night, Robin answered, although I saw a number of things that would classify as amusing or questionable. Do you like my hat? Usopp asked, indicating to the elaborate piece of clothing he'd won at the shooting range. It's lovely, Robin replied after a pause, though it's only added to the list of questionable things I've seen. They continued for a moment in silence, passing various vendors including many that boasted the signature poster of the Emperor's advisor. That second in charge to the Emperor seems like a pretty popular guy, Frankie noted as they passed yet another poster of said man, just as, if not even more so than the Emperor himself. But why, I wonder, said Usopp. Why not ask this guy here, Frankie suggested, indicating to a man who was operating a nearby stall. The Emperor's advisor. The merchant asked after having been questioned on the topic. He's a great man. We gathered that, Usopp said. What did he do to become such a great guy? Frankie asked. It was many years ago now, the merchant reflected. Shangpyo was quite a different place to the society you see today. How so? Quote. We were plagued by a seemingly incurable illness. It affected not only us, but our crops, our livelihoods. The future did not look bright and the disease was extremely contagious. As a city, we were crumbling. Bah, that's so heartbreaking, bro. Frankie blubbered. But then 28 years ago, when we'd almost run out of hope, he appeared. A man named Gao Chao. With him, he brought a miraculous cure that revolutionized our island as a nation. With this cure, we became even better off than we were before the plague had the better of us. As a result we prospered, and Gao Chao was given the position of the Emperor's right hand. We thrived so prosperously that now marks the turning of a dynasty for us. A new age has come, one without sickness and poverty, one with equality. If you take only one thing away with you when you depart this island, be it the fact that all this, he indicated to the surrounding festivities, would not be possible had it not been for Gao Chao. What a great guy, Frankie and Usopp lamented tearfully as Robin responded with a small smile. And while I'm at it, the merchant continued, not wanting opportunity go to waste, if you take another thing away with you when you depart, let it be an exquisite gift you've bought from my stall. Quote. The three crew members took one look at the variety of exorbitant prices which ranged from just bloody expensive to oh just wait a moment while I saw off an arm and leg and also have my children and their children forever pay the rest off expensive. So what do you say? The merchant pestered, what would you like? Quote. It's pretty pricey. We might just. I can give you a discount. Special price just for you. Quote. But the would-be customers had already left. Now that presentation from last night makes more sense, Frankie noted as they continued down the main street, and away from the square. With the whole plague thing and stuff, yeah, Usopp concurred. Robin strode on silently, thinking over what the merchant had said. There was something odd about what that man told us, she said eventually. Usopp and Frankie looked over from the conversation they'd been engaging in. What? About how his products were super exquisite. Well, I'll admit they were okay, but not exquisite and defiantly not super. I'm talking about the story he told us, Robin said. What about it? Quote. Something seemed off, but I can't yet place it. Nami was saying just yesterday that something didn't seem right about this place, Usopp recalled as they left the main road. Something strange about the city, Robin began, is that there are no wanted posters. Haven't you noticed? There doesn't seem to be signs of any marine activity either. Usopp observed. Hey, you're right. Quote. Maybe they took it all down to make the festival more super, Frankie suggested. Robin shrugged, I don't know. Capturing wanted criminals seems like too much of an important thing to not even have small notices up anywhere, even during a festival. Also, you might have noticed that this island issues its very own newspaper, which doesn't have any mention of pirates, criminals or any issues beyond the walls of this island for that matter. The other two pondered her words for the next few moments as the Thousand Sunny came into view. You're back in time for dinner. Sanji called down to them as they approached, noting only 3 had returned. Wait, where's Nami-san? Quote. Wasn't she back at the ship with you? Frankie questioned. No, I'm pretty sure she was in town with you since after lunch. Usopp gave him a confused look. She didn't come back here? Quote. I'll check the ladies' quarters, Robin said as she boarded the ship and entered the cabin that led to the women's bedroom. Now that you mention it, Brook isn't here either, Zoro noted, they've probably gotten themselves lost. Maybe they'll turn up soon, Chopper suggested hopefully. However, soon came and went quite quickly, and Nami wasn't in the women's quarters nor was Brook anywhere to be found. Weird, Zoro commented as he sipped from a manly pint of grog whilst he and the others gathered around the table beginning their dinner. Sanji was most unsettled. She never misses dinner, he fretted, neither of them do. Obviously they're having too much fun at the festival, Luffy stated as he munched on a leg of ham, no fair. After dinner, I wanna go back to the festival too. And we will, Sanji urgently pestered, we have to go and find Nami-san. Brook's missing as well, Usopp reminded him. It doesn't matter who's missing, Zoro said as he slammed his pint down and stood from his seat, we'll find them both. Yosh, Luffy said, finishing off his meal, it's about time they came back. If they take any longer, I'd have to eat their food. Quote. Then we'd better find them, Frankie contributed. Before something eats them, Luffy added. EHHHHH. Something's going to eat them if they don't come back in time. A shocked Chopper hollered. I don't believe so, Chopper, Robin assured, though now you mention it, if we don't go looking for them they may meet a similar ghastly fate. You mean that kangaroo ship's gonna eat them? Luffy questioned, no. It can't. It's an awesome ship and everything, but it better not have eaten Nami and Brook. Quote. I second that sentiment. Usopp joined in. Well then let's go out and find them, Sanji said, turning to leave the room. I'll go with you, Ichigo said as he too got to his feet. No you won't, Chopper insisted, suddenly switching from gullible mode to doctor mode and tugging him back down by the sleeve. I want to help them find Nami and Brook. Quote. You're still not well. If you run around the festival looking for people now, you'll only get worse. I need to keep screening you for the rest of the night and you need to rest. Ichigo opened his mouth to argue further, but was stopped by Zoro. Chopper's right, Ichigo, the swordsman said as Luffy, Usopp, Sanji and now Frankie continued to carry on like a group of lunatics. It would be best if you stayed here for the rest of the night, at least. Alright, Ichigo swallowed. Otherwise, we have 2 crew members to find, Sanji stated, we'll split up into 2 groups. Zoro, Usopp and Frankie, you search in and around the main square. I trust you know where that is, Marimo. Of course I do you arrow cook. What do you think I am, some sort of idiot? Quote. No comment. And don't forget the little side streets. The rest of us will look for them the main road and the docks, said Luffy, and also in the food places. Especially the ones that sell maya. Right. The rest of the crew cut off his ever-hungry proposal before it was finished, and the 2 groups dispersed from the ship in effort to locate their missing nakama. The walls were stone cold and damp, and the dull light in the room sparse. Muffled ambiance echoed down from the street somewhere above as unsuspecting locals partied their way into the deep night. An unpleasant, musty aroma radiated off the greasy walls, adding to the setting's overall repulsive interior, as well as to the disdain of the young woman situated behind the iron bars that stretched from the ground upwards. Nami shuffled about, trying to readjust herself into a more comfortable position on the hard, cobbled floor, before glaring across at the skeleton to her left. "This is all your fault." Chapter 9. Holes in the Wall. The cool night air was a refreshing contrast to the stuffy atmosphere within the infirmary. Ichigo stepped out into the night and appreciated the gentle breeze that ruffled at his hair and clothes. He crossed the deck and sat for a moment, admiring the stars in the sky. He lay on his back, reached out a hand and enclosed it, as though trying to catch the stars like he would dust particles, before bringing his hand back down to himself, opening it up and observing his palm. Sitting up, he continued to observe the detail of the lines and prints riddled about the hand. "If I can't find a way to properly fight to my capacity," he decided, "then I'll just have to make one." He stood and strode over to where the katana he borrowed was propped up against the staircase. Grabbing the katana, he held it in his hands and examined it thoroughly. It was well made. The sharp blade was solidly embedded within the hilt, which was long enough to comfortably be held in one or two hands. Ichigo brandished it before him and let his eyes follow the direction the long dark blade pointed, to somewhere beyond the horizon. Channeling into his Ryotsu, he sought out an ability he had not tapped into much before. "Ichigo. What are you doing?" Chopper's voice suddenly sounded from nearby. "Training," Ichigo said with a grin. "Are you sure you can?" Quote. "I feel fine now, Chopper," Ichigo insisted, "just let me do this." He held tight as the small deer insisted on fussing over him and checking his temperature. "Well, you're doing much better now," he noted, "but you still should rest." "Well, what good is sitting around feeling sorry for myself gonna do?" He questioned. "I know what my limitations are now, and I don't want them to stop me. Until I find Zanjetsu, there's a different approach I might be able to use to fight in a similar way to what I'm used to." "Alright." Chopper gave in, "but only for a few minutes and I'm gonna watch you." He wandered over to and sat down on a nearby crate, where he crossed his arms and watched intently. Ichigo returned to what he had been doing prior to Chopper's interruption, positioning his sword correctly, reaching into that source of Shinigami Ryotsu, before. "Awesome!" Chopper cried, after Ichigo enacted the idea he had had in his mind. "It worked," Ichigo said, surprised by his own success. So cool." Chopper continued, his eyes shining with an almost blinding light. "It's not perfect yet," Ichigo said, "that was a really simple one. I guess I'll get better at it. I'll have to rely on it now when really strong guys come along." Content for the time being, he set the katana back by the staircase and took a seat on the staircase beside Chopper's crate. "Did I tell you my old man is a doctor?" Ichigo asked him after a short while. "Really?" Chopper questioned, eyes wide. "I guess you did. You mentioned he ran a clinic." "Yeah," said Ichigo, "and he's kinda a Shinigami as well. Sort of like how you're a pirate and a doctor." "So cool," Chopper said, "I bet he has lots of awesome medicines then." Quote. "Although, I think he could probably learn some things from you," Ichigo said with a smile. "You're a really good doctor. You're gonna go far." At once, the small reindeer was reduced to a short routine of swiveling on the spot, making no effort to hide a large smile. "Hearing you say that doesn't make me happy at all. Bastard. Quote. You look pretty damn happy. Pull harder." Quote. I'm trying. Quote. Who'd have known that a simple raft could be a complete and utter bitch to make? I'm sick of this place. Grimjow raged, slamming down the pile of timber he was carrying and eyeing the crudely constructed excuse of a sailing vessel with disdain. And I'm sick of you, you damn Ichigo wannabe. Quote. What did I do, you electric blue freak? Khan retaliated, sick of the Urankar's constant bitching. They'd been on this island for close enough to 2 weeks now. Rather, they'd been with each other for close enough to 2 weeks now. Either way, it was more than enough. I swear, once we find the real Ichigo, Grimjow ground his teeth. I'll superglue that ridiculous Zanpakuto of his to his arm and bolt shut every damn drain in Karakura town. He's not going anywhere. Quote. Damn straight. Khan seconded. At least they could find something they agreed on. Otherwise, the state of the two's matters was not unlike the drifting apart raft that sat before them. Oi! Don't let that float away. Grimjow demanded. Damn it, Khan muttered, barely reaching the piece of wood before it drifted beyond reaching distance. Rafts. How do they work? Quote. This was, in fact, their fifth raft. The first raft had been built shortly after the first run-in with the Okama parade. It had been built in such a hurry, they had forgotten to put a floor in it, only to discover this halfway out to sea when they realized they were in fact underwater and the remains of the so-called raft were bobbing aimlessly by the shore. The second raft had failed when a giant dolphin landed on it. The third may have been successful, had they not gotten into a squabble over seating positions and caused it to float away when they pushed each other off. As for the fourth, it was accidentally set alight when the two set out and decided to use the wood to light a fire and toast marshmallows. And now, the fifth, simply wasn't cooperating. Khan groaned, dumb raft, I can't stand this anymore. Quote. Proceeding to take an impromptu break, the mod soul located a discarded, slightly out-of-date newspaper. Meh, he shrugged, may as well read about what's going on in this world. And so he flicked through, searching for anything remotely interesting. Let's see, Fleet Admiral Akainu bans all things ice-related from HQ, including refrigerators, causing the resident cooks to go into panic about where to store the food. Ha ha ha. What an idiot. Pirate Empress Boa Hancock warns pursuers that she has already found her true love and will attack indiscriminately if told otherwise. Wow, what a beauty. This true love of hers must be one lucky guy. Shichibukai Trafalgar Law put on probation for going to a local fair and messing with body parts for the lulz. Hey. Body parts? Must be a metaphor for something. Infamous Straw Hat Pirates may be harboring a new crew member. PFFFF. Boring. Kid pirates send further hindrances to Big Ma'am by blowing up a ship. Pirates? What is it? Grimjow questioned when Khan returned. Maybe what we need is a boat. And so deep into the night, Khan and Grimjow snuck into the village, where they stole a small, cheap little rowboat. And by sunrise they were beyond the horizon, with no food, no log pose, plenty of salty, hallucination-inducing water and naught but each other's company. The empty hours waned by and felt like even more hours when stuck in an empty cell with Brooke. The musician, however, didn't seem to mind. The others will find us, he had said, until then, we just have to wait. Though what we do in our time spent waiting is entirely up to us. In the end, we'll still be waiting whether we just sit around or occupy ourselves with something else, so we might as well do as we like. You know, I really question your mentality sometimes, Nami commented dryly as the skeleton rolled past her. Being confined to a cell, she had had more than enough of Brooke's various antics. All he seemed to be doing was amusing the guards. Come over here, Nami-san, said Brooke as he stood to his feet beside one of the cell's walls. "I'll teach you how to do 45 degrees." Quote, "I don't want to learn how to do that," she snapped at him. Brooke responded by doing said move himself. "Honestly," Nami huffed, "think about the situation at hand. Use your brain for once." Quote, "Well, you see, Nami-san," Brooke said, rolling back, "I don't actually have a whack." Ellipsis. Nami had been spending her alone time enjoying the various clothing shops she wouldn't have been able to enjoy for herself had she been with the boys. As she made her way toward the west of the square, she noted a crowd of excited people had been congregating for over an hour as they admired some sort of spectacle. Heading in the general direction, curiosity got the better of her and she saw no harm in taking a quick look at what all the fuss was about. Working her way through the gathered crowd, she eventually came across a sight a lot more familiar than she was expecting. "Brooke?" she questioned. In the center of the crowd's excitement, the long skeleton stood equipped with his signature violin. "Soul King." One of the crowd's excited members called out, "Soul King has come to perform at our festival." Quote, "Well, since my fans insist, yo-ho," Brooke chuckled, before beginning the chords for one of his most popular songs. However, it was not to last. From within the crowd, a variety of the island's officers came forth, though Brooke didn't cease his tune. "Soul King Brooke," one of them stated, "you're under arrest." Nami quickly moved behind a tall man to the right, where she watched the rest of the scene play out. "Am I?" Brooke questioned as his music continued, unfazed. "That's a shame. If I may finish this one song first though." Most of the officers gave a nod, seeing no harm in letting the Soul King work the rest of his magic. The one who had spoken, however, was not about to mess around. "Seize him," the man ordered, and Brooke was at once restrained by the officers. Nami quickly attempted to make herself scarce, and would have gotten away with it, had Brooke not seen her. "Ah, Nami," he called, "Nami, my nakama. It seems I've gotten myself into a bit of a situation." Nami walked backwards into the crowd trying to disappear whilst still keeping the idiotic skeleton within her sight, only to walk into the hands of one of the officers. "I've got his accomplice," the officer called out as Nami felt herself cuffed and disarmed quicker than she could comprehend. "Good. Let's move out," the head officer commanded. Nami struggled against the officer who held her captive, but to no avail. He was at least 3 times her size. "Damn it," she thought to herself as he and Brooke were removed from the square and taken along a road she had not been up yet. And what's with Brooke? Shouldn't he be at least trying to escape? Scanning her gaze to anywhere there would be people, she searched hurriedly for any other member of the crew. She managed to glimpse Zoro, but of course the idiot was looking in the wrong direction and was gone before she could make herself noticed. Before long, they descended into a small shoddy-looking building away from the ongoing festivities, where their cell awaited. Ellipsis. "You're such an idiot." Nami snapped at Brooke, "If you'd have just kept your mouth shut, I could have busted you out or at least told the others you'd been captured. But now it's going to be like the two of us have disappeared without any explanation." Quote, "We'll get out of here, Nami-san," Brooke assured her. "Even if left to our own devices, I'm sure we could." "You could what?" Quote, the navigator and musician looked over from their discussion to see a man descending the stairs, robed in a rich forest green tunic, his long black hair tied back. "You," Nami said. "You know him?" Brooke asked. "This man," Nami said, "he was the one at the puppet theater yesterday." "I am Quillam, head of Shangpio's secret corps, overseen by Gao Chao himself," the man said as he reached the cell. "The whole puppet thing is a bit of a favorite pastime." Gao Chao, Nami scanned the name in her mind, Sure, she'd seen it written down somewhere elsewhere. Isn't he the emperor's right hand? Quote, "You are well informed, my girl," Quillam commended her. "Pity for you you're unable to inform your companions of your capture." No thanks to one companion in particular, Nami remarked as she eyes Brook offhandedly. "Gao Chao has become aware of the presence of you Straw Hat pirates," Quillam continued, "and the force that caught you is now going about capturing your friends." "There's no way you'll be able to capture them," Nami told him. "Oh? I wouldn't be too sure." "Oi! Nami! Brook! Are you here?" Luffy yelled down into a well. "Where could they have gotten to?" Sanji asked as he desperately scouted a dozen trees. "Perhaps they've been kidnapped by mountain dwellers, have been struck by a grave illness," Robin suggested. "Or maybe they're in another street," Sanji said. "I think that one there also leads to the square. It's worth a look." Luffy went to bolt in said direction, when a set of arms bloomed from the ground and stopped him. "Wait, Luffy," Robin said as she approached him, wary of their surroundings. "What is it?" Sanji asked. "The people," Robin replied as she indicated to people at nearby stalls, or wandering the street. "Over the past half hour they've slowly been circling us." "Huh?" Quote, "Trust me. I know what I'm talking about." When Sanji stopped to observe the people shuffling through the street around them, he noticed something off. No single person was on their own. The groups were clusters of at least 3, and of these groups there was always one person eyeing the 3 crew members, in varying degrees of subtleness. In that case, Sanji began, "We should, wait, where's Luffy?" Quote, "The 2 looked over to see Luffy running on ahead. Just try stopping us," he shouted, presumably to the people surrounding them. "We'll definitely find our Nakama. Don't worry, Nami and Brook. We're coming, you 2 idiots." Quote. However, Luffy's rather explosive declaration only resulted in the surrounding undercover officers to take action earlier than they otherwise would have. Swiftly, and seemingly like a single unit, the various groups merged together as one ring around Luffy, Sanji and Robin and brandished their assortment of knives and blades. "Nice one, Captain," Sanji facepalmed. "By order of the higher court of Shangpaio, you are under arrest," one of the men spoke. "Eh?" Luffy questioned, picking his nose. "Have you taken Nami and Brook?" Sanji demanded. "Who we have or haven't arrested is confidential, pirate," the officer said. "Now we can do this the easy way or the hard way." "You had to tell us where our Nakama are first," Luffy insisted. "I have already said that that piece of information is confidential." Luffy clenched his fists and positioned himself ready to fight. "Oh yeah? Then we're confidential as well." Quote. Sanji let a plume of smoke out as he chuckled at his captain's words, and he and Robin prepared likewise. However, whatever was to come next was not to be. "Thump, eh?" Luffy looked over to where the sound had come from, a look of anticipation in his features. "Thump." The noise sounded again, closer before. "Thump." A large structure landed itself before the 3 Straw Hat pirates. "Huh?" Quote. "It's the Kanga ship," Luffy exclaimed in excitement. "Climb aboard," a voice aboard the ship called down to them hurriedly. "Don't fight them. You'll only give them more reason to place you under arrest." "And the Osan from the other night," Luffy added, stretching himself up onto the oddity of a ship, Sanji and Robin scurrying after him. The ship proceeded to make another large bound, leaving the officers far behind. "You'd better have a good explanation for all that," Sanji said dryly as Hailong bounded them away from the city and into the night. "I'm sorry you had to get caught up in all that, my friends," their friend said, shaking his head regretfully. "You've come to this island not knowing the truth, I'm afraid." "Truth?" Sanji questioned, "What's going on? Were that lot undercover Marines?" Quote. Their friend shook his head. No. Undercover officers, yes. But Marines, no. What's going on? Nami questioned Quillam. Why are you after us? Are you with the world government? No. Only the government of this island. If you can call it a government, that is. Haven't you noticed some strange things about this place? There are no wanted posters, no other pirate ships in the bay. There are walls built up on the coast surrounding the island, and it has its own newspaper. Yeah, what of it? Sanji questioned. What's going on here? Nami asked. You see, on this island, truth be told, there is no age of the pirates. Chapter 10. Zhang's Conspiracy. What do you mean, no age of the pirates? Sanji questioned, unaware that his cigarette had burnt out. It means what it sounds like it means, answered the man. The citizens of this island have no idea of the pirate age that began all those years ago. So the people here are all idiots, Luffy concluded. Sanji whacked him. I'm afraid it's not that simple, young Straw Hat, the man said with a sigh. By the way, I have yet to properly introduce myself. My name is Xiaomin. Well then, Xiaomin, Sanji nodded courteously. Would you mind telling us what the hell is going on? Quote. Xiaomin stood and straightened out his robes, his deep green eyes reflecting the lights of Zanpakuto as Hyalong traversed them further and further from the city. We should move inside, he said, turning to one of the ship's cabins and advancing. Luffy, Sanji and Robin shared a glance, before following Xiaomin in. Once all were seated around a solitary table, complete with customary tea, Xiaomin began. You've probably all heard the story, he said, of the reason we're able to move into a new dynasty. It was because of the Emperor's right hand, Gao Chao, Robin said with a nod. Yes, replied Xiaomin, you may remember the presentation from the other night. With the lights? Luffy questioned, that was really cool, I want to see it again. Quote. Xiaomin chuckled. I'm glad it entertained you, at least. Though seeing as you are pirates of the current, thriving age from which this island has been sheltered, I feel you have the right to know the complete truth. Shang, he paused, is not as perfect a place as its exterior might have you believe, but sadly, the truth the average civilian on this island believes is not the complete truth. Though I wish it were, in fact. I used to be part of Gao Chao's league, but that was many years ago. It was there that I discovered the truth. Are you gonna tell us or not? Luffy questioned, fidgeting restlessly. Sorry, Xiaomin uttered with a nod, without further interruption. Understandably, after curing the plague, Gao Chao gained an absolute trust from the people. This of course, is why he was assigned as the Emperor's right hand. However, he used this too much to his own advantage. Shortly after he was appointed, he slowly cut Shang off from the rest of the world, secluding it entirely to its own society. His intentions were to make a utopic environment, which I guess to the oblivious civilian, it is. But not without sinister motive. You see, it is essentially he who controls what goes on here in Zanpakuto. It's as though the actual emperor is simply a figurehead, a puppet controlled by his second-in-command. Just look around and you'll see it everywhere. The walls were under his request, as was the local newspaper. Well, that's not too horrible a thing, Robin noted. It may be very secretive and dishonest, but I'm sure there's worse things he could be doing. Yeah, said Luffy, like telling all the people that there's no such thing as meat and having them only ever eat vegetables. But there are worse things he's doing, said Xiaomin. Back when I was in his league at the palace, I rose up fairly high in the ranks. That's when I learned about Gao Chao's actions, as well as his motive. He's a bounty hunter. A bounty hunter? Luffy and Sanji questioned simultaneously. Indeed, Xiaomin confirmed, letting a fist fall through his long dark hair. Whenever a pirate crew does come here, Gao Chao is quick to find out about it. He has ears and eyes everywhere, you see, plenty of undercover officers within his command. Pirates are quickly located and taken away. He has a deal running with the Marines that any pirates who end up on this island will be handed over. That's why they were after us, Sanji realized. So then, Luffy figured, Nami and Brook are. That shitty asshole right hand, Sanji cursed, grounding his burnt-out cigarette into the timber floor. Aside from the higher-ups within Gao Chao's league, there are only a few who know of this, Xiaomin continued. I keep what I know private. This has been the first time I've revealed my knowledge to anyone. Those who have found out in the past have had a tendency to mysteriously go missing. Why are you bothering to tell us this then? Sanji questioned, surely other pirates have been here before. That is correct, Xiaomin acknowledged, however, they've mostly only been passing ruffians who've deserved to be caught. I can tell though that you lot are good people. We need to get Nami and Brook back, Luffy told him. Do you know where they'd be kept? Quote. I have some idea, yes, Xiaomin answered. I can have you dropped off nearby. It's very thoughtful of you to do this for us, Robin said with a smile. I sure hope you're not going to get caught. I won't get caught, he acknowledged as he glanced out one of the ship's portholes, but as a former subordinate of Gao Chao, I do have some advice for you. Be careful of whom you put your trust in. Also, I would advise docking your ship elsewhere, and not so close to the town. I know a nice cove not far south of where your ship is currently docked, where your risk of discovery would be a lot less. Yosh. Luffy replied, thanks, Kanga Boat Osan. Quote. Brook waited until he was sure the echoing of the guard's feet had long since faded before making his move. Stealthily, he leapt up from where he was sitting and stepped over Nami, who appeared to have dozed off. It was getting quite late after all, and it wasn't like there was anything interesting to do in the cell aside amusing oneself. He crouched down low once he reached the strong iron door that confined them, before tinkering with the lock. It was quite fiddly, but he figured that eventually something would give. A sound behind him suddenly made him freeze up. Nami had stirred. After a short moment, he quickly got back to his efforts of setting them free. What are you doing? Nami's voice hissed across to him. Brook responded by turning holding a bony finger to where anyone else's lips would usually be, and returned to what he was doing. Relax, Nami-san, he said as she silently made her way over, I have come prepared. The navigator looked on as Brook continued to fiddle with the lock. Finally, with a satisfying click, the door quietly creaked open. Well, that was really quite simple. Being made entirely of bones does have its uses, yo-ho. Quote. Shush. Nami shushed him as they quietly crept from the cell. If you get us caught again, I'll make sure you do end up in the afterlife this time around. Now, we need to find our weapons. I think they're that way, Brook whispered unnecessarily as he indicated to a nearby door. Alright. Nami nodded and the two continued to silently make their way up the corridor. As they drew nearer, muffled voices could be distinguished from nearby. It will happen tomorrow at the closing ceremony. The smooth voice of Quillam echoed over to them. If we all stick to this plan, all should go smoothly. Indeed, Master. Came a response, the Emperor won't see it coming and neither will the people. They won't suspect a thing. Quote. They're planning something, Nami observed, straining to hear more. That would appear to be the case, Brook said as he inclined his head. Now, we should get our weapons back. And see if they have any treasure. Let's keep going, Nami said. They snuck past the room Quillam was holding his meeting in and out into what resembled a common area. Nami ducked into a nearby room, where she did not find either of their weapons, but rather returned with an armful of silken material. Now then, Brook said, we just have to find our weapons and we can be on our way. Now let's see, where could they have put them? Maybe in the cupboard? Or perhaps in the fridge to keep them icy? Brook, Nami said, tugging on his sleeve and getting his attention. She proceeded to indicate to what was before them. A group of villagers had appeared. Thinking of the undercover officers that had caught them, Nami and Brook prepared themselves to fight barehanded. However, there was something different about this group. Soul King. They whispered in unison, pure delight reflected in their faces. You even have fans down in these dungeons? Nami pondered, slacking in her stance. We've come for you. Quote. Two from the group stepped forward, presenting Brook and Nami with their respective weaponry. Why are you helping us? Nami asked them. We'd do anything for the Soul King. One man replied. Well, what I know, Nami said, your musical persona has its uses as well. Yo ho ho, how lucky I am to have such loyal fans. Brook commented, examining his blade, even going as far as helping me escape from prison. If I had a heart, it would be racing right now. But the villagers seemed anxious for answers to other things. Why'd you disappear, Soul King? Quote. Yeah, that final concert of yours cut out before you could finish what you were saying. It did? Brook asked. I guess the officials here didn't want the people knowing about the age of pirates after all. A sudden explosion alerted Brook, Nami and the villagers to another set of intruders. The group dodged as a large section of the opposite wall was blasted away, leaving a destructive trail of dust and debris. Brook followed the path of destruction with his non-existent eyes and made out three distinct figures in the settling dust. Oh, it's Zoro-san with Frankie-san and Usopp-kun. Frankie stood at the front, the stump of his left arm smoldering as he gazed intently into the rubble he'd created. Zoro and Usopp stood either side him, both armed and ready in case an enemy had been beyond the wall they'd collapsed. I think you overdid that, weapons left a bit, Usopp said to Frankie as the cyborg lowered his huge, mecha-like arm. Frankie shrugged, I just made it a bit too super. That's all. Idiots. Nami snapped from across the room, don't just blast through a wall without knowing what's on the other side. That was dangerous. Quote. Sorry, Usopp said with a bow. It seems we have quite the rescue party, Nami-san, Brook said to her. Seems so. They've already busted themselves out by the looks, Zoro commented as he stepped forth and looked around for an enemy to fight. All we have to do now is get out of here, Nami said. However, the sudden intrusion of the various villagers and pirates was not left unnoticed. Who's out there? One of the guards' approaching voices came from up the hall they'd come down. Our prisoners. Another voice called from further away, they're gone. Quote. WH what? They can't have gone far, Quillam stammered from up the passageway, do not let them escape. Quote. Thanks for your help, Brook said to his fans, now off you go. Quote. The group of villagers obediently hurried through the opening in the wall Frankie had made, just as a set of guards rounded the corner. Perfect timing, Zoro commended as he placed the white hilt of Waldo Ichimonji in the secure grip of his teeth and charged forth, instantly incapacitating a pair of the guards before they could attack. Usopp took care of another two, whilst Brook, Nami and Frankie ran back up the hall to make sure there were no more waiting to attack. However, Quillam had disappeared. Why that cowardly little, Nami cursed, before turning to the other four, we should go. Yes. We should, Usopp seconded. Chopper and Ichigo are waiting back at the ship, Zoro informed Nami and Brook. The other three went to look for you elsewhere, but they should be returning pretty soon. Right, Nami nodded. They ran through the impounded wall and ascended another flight of stairs, before emerging in a small street just off the main road. The night's cool air rushed past them as they ran back in the direction of the sunny. It wasn't long before three extra figures joined them, having just disembarked the Kanga ship. Everyone. Luffy beamed, Robin and Sanji at his side. Nami swan tilde. Sanji twirled in a very Sanji-ish way. back to the ship. Nami told them hurriedly, we need to move it, before they can track us. Ichigo was contemplating heading to bed for the night when the hurried sounds of numerous pairs of feet approached the ship. He prepared himself for any possible offense, only to find it was the crew returning. "Ah, you're back," he greeted them with a nod as they swiftly boarded the ship and got to work. "Everyone's all right?" Chopper made sure, quickly surveying them as they passed. "We're fine," Zoro replied as he looked back out toward the city. "What's going on?" Ichigo asked. "We need to move the ship elsewhere," Sanji explained to them. "How come?" asked Chopper. As Luffy and Usopp animatedly relayed to them what had happened, Frankie took hold of the ship's steering. After about 15 minutes they reached a small cove, perfectly sized for the Sunny to dock comfortably. "This looks like the place he described," Sanji noted as they sailed in. When Sunny had docked, Nami and Brook spoke of their encounter. "It must have been so horrible for you, Nami-san," Sanji doted sympathetically, handing her a mug of her favorite tea, which she thanked him for and proceeded to sip on. "We overheard him talking about some sort of plan," Brook relayed, "whatever it was sent shivers down my spine. Not that I have oh wait, I do. Yo-ho-ho-ho. Quote. Nami groaned, having had more than enough of the skeleton over the past few hours. "What was his plan?" Frankie asked. "We didn't hear completely," Nami said, "but whatever it is, we need to be more careful than ever. Oh. There's an island. Quote. Where? Over there, sticking out of the water. Quote. Ah, I see it. Finally, we can get off the ship. Quote. And we can explore. Quote. Island, island, island tilde adventure, adventure tilde." The muffled sounds of the two voices echoed down into one of the main cabins, where their obnoxiousness festered. Smoker ground his teeth, ignoring the strong taste of nicotine from his multiple cigars as he gripped the pen he was attempting to write with a little too tightly. He was beyond simply trying to block out the noise the two idiots he'd taken on from Munkeln were continuously generating. So he stood from his desk and exited the room, proceeding to ascend the staircase and emerge above deck. Sure enough, Charlie and Merlin were arm in arm, singing some idiotic, on-the-spot nattering about islands and adventures. "Oi," Smoker said, capturing their attention. They turned to him, a mix of surprise and anxiety suddenly dawning on their faces. "Gya." Quote. "It's Rear Admiral Smoker." Quote. "Of course it's me," Smoker chastised. "He's annoyed," declared Merlin. "He'll demote us for sure," Charlie added. In an instant, the two, who up until recently had been joyously celebrating, were crisscrossing the deck in panic, not unlike a pair of headless chickens. Smoker sighed and tried to keep his sanity in check. "I won't get you demoted for something like that," he repeated to them for the umpteenth time in a week, "idiots." "Oh, that's good to know," Merlin sighed in relief as the two abruptly stopped their impromptu laps of the deck. "Just try to quiet it down a bit," Smoker said. "Okay, Rear Admiral Smoker," Charlie affirmed and proceeded to salute. With the wrong hand. "And enough with the title whenever you say my name," Smoker told them. "Geez, it's a mouthful. If you two are going to be working with me for a while, I prefer you not waste time by saying my title every single time you address me." There was a pause as the two young Marines exchanged an unsure glance. "What should we call you then, Smoker-san?" Quote. "That. Huh? Just, Smoker-san." Quote. "When out of formality like now, that would be fine." "All right," Merlin said, "we'll try to remember." "Will you be giving us any special names, Smoker-san?" Quote. "Well," replied Smoker, "let me see, as far as I'm concerned for the time being. You two are Idiot 2 and Idiot 3. "Who's Idiot 1? Charlie curiously questioned. "Idiot 1, said Smoker, is the man we're chasing. What? Merlin hollered, his deep purple hair suddenly given the ability to defy gravity. We're chasing an idiot? Quote. Smoker sighed, I already established that to you. I really want to see that Straw Hat Luffy, Charlie lamented, so I can see for myself how much of an idiot he is. Well, if we end up on the same island as him at the same time, he won't take too long to make his presence known, Smoker assured them, but while he's an idiot, he's a powerful one. You both know all about that, right? Quote. Yes. The Marine boys nodded hurriedly. And also, I'm going to say this. While you both have idiot in your names, try not to be ones on this island. Why's that? Rear ad, Smoker-san. Quote. Smoker looked out at the shape of Zanpakuto as it slowly grew closer in the distance. You see, as far as most people on this island know, there's no such thing as the age of pirates, he said. That's just the way its current government works, and we have to work with that. Personally, I think it's stupid and that the people have the right to know the truth of the world's current state. But hey, once the higher-ups have made up their minds, there's no going back. Speaking of which, you probably shouldn't tell any of the higher-ups I said that. That's weird, commented Merlin, as Charlie gave a frown. Yes, but don't do anything stupid. I don't want you two getting in trouble, that would be annoying. The two nodded sagely. We will be discreet then, Charlie said. Real discreet, Merlin added. In fact, we'll be so discreet, you won't even know we're there. Quote. But don't actually forget we're there, or you might accidentally leave us on the island. Yeah. That would be horrible. Please don't forget about us, Smoker-san. Quote. Don't worry, Smoker sighed, even if I did forget you, I'd soon realize the ship was too quiet before we'd even left the port. I think you're pretty safe. Charlie and Merlin sighed in relief. Within the hour the ship had docked in a port in Zanpakuto, and the G5 Marine Fleet disembarked into the island's thriving city, which was adorned with a multitude of fluorescent colors and lights, and streaming with various festive-clad locals and street performers. A banquet of aromas from nearby food stalls mingled with the buzzing atmosphere of music and chatter. Merlin and Charlie looked as though all their future promotions had come at once. A festival. They chanted. I love festivals. Charlie said, failing to contain his excitement. Off you go, Smoker said, glad to dismiss them. Meet back here in a few hours. But remember what we talked about. Yes, sir. The two boys saluted, before disappearing into the crowd. Is it smart to let those two go off on their own? Toshigi questioned. Hey, Smoker shrugged, I guess we'll see soon enough. A lazy morning would soon be transitioning into a lazy afternoon. Ichigo paced the deck, mindlessly revising phrases and stances, as well as various combos that may be helpful when it came to fighting stronger opponents. Zoro sat nearby, where he went about doing some light weight lifts with his left hand. A pleasant sound drifted past in the form of Brook playing one of his joyous upbeat pieces, and Usopp and Chopper tinkered with the strange water gun that had been left by one of the sea nymphs. Frankie, whom was currently busying himself with a couple of Den Den Mushi installations throughout the ship, had given them permission to pull it apart and figure out its mechanism while he worked on other things. Sanji spun past with a set of drinks for Nami, whom was currently poring over some sort of map on the deck, and Robin, whom was probably somewhere in the library doing Robin-ish things. All seemed quite content. Well, all except? I'm bored, a voice whined, the festival is so much more fun. Quote. One very bothersome captain. One more day until the log sets, Nami noted from nearby, you can hold still until then, and we'll be back out at sea. Luffy grumbled. I think some of us should go back into town, Zoro said, just to check out what's going on with that Quillam guy, make sure he's not up to anything. It's pretty clear already that he's up to something, Nami said. Why not go in and find out what he's got planned and trying to stop him, Ichigo suggested with a shrug. That's not a bad idea, Zoro admitted. Alright, Nami said, but I'm going with you. Oh. So we're going back to the festival? Awesome. Luffy happily bounded over and dragged Usopp from his gun dissecting. Wait, Nami called over to them. We don't want to attract the attention of those officers again. We need to try and blend in, or at least not look like ourselves. Ichigo's not widely recognized by the world government yet, so he should be alright, but whoever else is going. Yosh. Luffy commanded, this means disguises, everyone. Quote. I was going to suggest wearing some of the festival clothes, Nami said with a shrug, but as long as you don't look like yourself, I guess. But Luffy had already disappeared into the men's quarters. He returned a couple of seconds later equipped with an afro and a ridiculous pair of glasses. Ichigo eyed the captain's new look skeptically. Well, Luffy said, how's this for a disguise? Quote. Disregarding the fact he was still essentially in his usual style of clothing, there was nothing subtle about the afro, and the glasses practically screamed of someone attempting, and failing, to disguise themselves. Not to mention the straw hat hanging from his shoulders should have been a telltale giveaway to even the most gullible of idiots. Well, Moon Guy? Quote. It looks kind stupid, Ichigo said. Luffy's response was to remove the afro and strange glasses. For a moment Ichigo thought Luffy was taking his advice seriously and not bothering with the disguise at all, and proceeded to contort his face into some sort of scowl which, for some unknown reason, seemed oddly familiar to Ichigo. Ichigo impersonation. Quote. Huh? Ichigo blinked over as the captain continued to scowl and then crossed his arms. It looks kinda stupid, he mimicked Ichigo's recent comment. And then it all made sense. That scowl is familiar because I see it in the mirror every day, Ichigo realized. But Luffy hadn't finished his fun yet. Returning to his normal self, he said, Oi, Usopp. When I give the signal, fire one of those exploding things at me. Sure, Usopp responded as he stifled laughter and prepared his slingshot. Luffy returned to his Ichigo-like stance and positioned his hands in front of him, as though about to perform some sort of Kido spell. He then spoke. With the power of fire and frowning and exploding beams and something along those lines I don't remember. I'm bad at this poetry. Hado 33. Explodus in my facius. Quote. Usopp followed the signal and proceeded to fire one of his small fire stars at Luffy, who swatted with his hand, thus allowing it to explode in his face. Usopp hit the ground in stitches. It's perfect. He praised through waves of laughter as he applauded his captain's display, it's just like him. Ha ha ha. Quote. That's nothing like me. Ichigo retaliated, but to no avail. Actually, Zoro closely inspected Luffy's now smoldering impersonation, it kinda is a bit. You seriously just got Usopp to fire one of those things at your face just so you could do an accurate impersonation of how bad my Kido is? Ichigo questioned satirically, you know, it is improving. Worth it, Luffy managed as he continued to smolder and slowly fisted the air. Usopp got up off the floor and clapped him on the shoulder, that was spectacular. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha, it was pretty good wasn't it? Luffy laughed as he snapped back to his normal self. Ichigo caught himself snickering, but refused to concur. Put this on, Luffy, Nami chuckled as she chucked a deep red garment his way. What's this? The Straw Hat Captain pondered, closely examining the piece of clothing. It had long, flaring sleeves and appeared to be some sort of hybrid between a tunic and robes, also coming with a pair of black leggings. That looks like the type of tunic those guards around the island wear, Zoro noted with a raised eyebrow. Cut me some slack, Nami snapped as she threw another similar garment at him and another to Usopp. There were a pile of them in a room Brook and I entered last night. While there was no gold or jewels, these are made from a very fine silk. So no ruining them, and I would like them back when we're done. can I still wear the afro? Luffy pleaded. Can he, please? Usopp joined. Fine, said Nami, just as long as you wear the guard robes with it. Nami proceeded to dress herself in some of her own finery she'd bought, but this time covered her head with an additional silk scarf. I think this one is a bit big, the afroed Luffy noted, observing the way his tunic came down well past his knees and scraped at the tops of his feet, covering the accompanying leggings and giving it more the appearance of a dress. Deal with it, said Nami. Ready? Zoro questioned, strapping on his 3 katanas, having refused to part with them. After bidding farewell to the rest of the crew, the 5 set out from the sunny and toward the structure in the distance. To the town. Quote. Ellipsis. The walk to the city was noticeably longer now the ship was docked further away, but Luffy and Usopp amused themselves all the same. Eventually, they reached the city's outskirts. We should split into groups, Zoro said, though Ichigo, you'll look less suspicious on your own. So who are we looking for? Quote. Quillam, Nami said, the man from the puppet show yesterday, if you remember what he looks like. Nope, Luffy shook his head. I remember, Usopp said, Luffy can come with me. Alright, said Nami, if you find him, just follow him. And do it subtly. Try to find out what he might be planning, and for goodness sakes, don't be idiots. Yosh. Luffy said, we'll be good. Quote. We'll start at the puppet theater and see if he's there, Usopp said, and they were off. Hopefully they'll do what they're supposed to and not get distracted by all the attractions, Zoro commented. In which case, we need to be extra alert for him, Nami said, let's go. We'll first look around the area Brook and I were captured. Ichigo, you look around wherever else. And they were gone. Ichigo was left awkwardly standing on his own. What did that guy look like again? He wondered to himself. 10 minutes went by and Ichigo was aimlessly wandering through the crowd. I'm really bad at remembering faces, he said to himself as he made his way through the mass of people, but maybe if I were to actually see him, I'd remember. Ichigo watched as the masses passed, talking to each other in hurried excitement of the closing ceremony to come in a few hours. The new dynasty was not that far off, and the festival seemed even more crowded than it had before. Ichigo guessed there must have been a few small settlements in other parts of the island which people had traveled from to witness the defining moment in their island's history. And yet as far as all these civilians knew, nothing significant had been happening in the outside world in all these years. Regardless of whether the ignorance to the age of pirates was the best thing for the island or not, Ichigo could not help but feel the people had been brainwashed and controlled, that the island was corrupt. And then he saw him. The face he recognized as Puppeteer from yesterday, deep within the crowd. The guy who'd taken Brook and Nami, one of Gao Chao's henchmen. Not wanting to lose sight of him, Ichigo jogged along the main street after him, lowering his speed so to avoid running into other festival goers. He reached a bend and quickly turned, not wanting to let the man get too far ahead. However, in his hurry he misjudged his increase in speed and clumsily collided with a strongly built body, sending him to the ground. Watch where you're going, kid, a rough voice cautioned him from above, before the speaker knelt down to help him up. You alright? Quote. Why yeah, I'm fine, Ichigo said as he was pulled to his feet. His eyes quickly scanned the crowds, but he'd lost sight of whatever he'd been pursuing. Sorry about that, and thanks. Looking up, he observed the man he'd run into. He was tall and muscular and appeared to be somewhere in his mid-30s, with a naturally white sheen to his short hair and a scar over his right eye. He also appeared to be smoking 2 cigars, and like Ichigo and the Straw Hats, didn't seem to be quite in place with the festival's vibe. Are you from here? Ichigo questioned before he could stop himself. The man shook his head. I was about to ask you the same thing. Just passing through, Ichigo responded, figuring it best to leave out the detail he was traveling with a crew of pirates. The man exhaled a plume of smoke. Same here, he seconded, been at sea for a long time. Traveling the Grand Line after this one particular guy. Sounds intense, Ichigo admitted. Are you trying to catch up with him? Quote. Obviously. Is he a friend of yours? Quote. Not quite. It's good to finally get off that ship though, the man said. Some of the men I travel with have a tendency to be overly energetic. It's good for the lot of us to be able to go off on our own for a bit rather than always be stuck on the ship together. I know how that feels, Ichigo laughed. I'm Ichigo, by the way. Ichigo, eh? Name's Smoker. He's not here, Luffy pouted when he and Usopp finally reached the puppet show stand, and I really wanted to see a show. Quote. Luffy, I think you're missing the point, Usopp said. We're looking for this guy so we can find out what he's up to, not just to watch a puppet show. After further searching in the area, the two concluded that the puppet Osan must be elsewhere. And thus, they found themselves somewhere back on the main street. Oi, Usopp noted after a moment, who's Ichigo talking to over there? Quote. Luffy looked over to where his friend was pointing, squinting out the sunlight in his eyes, before they widened. It's Smokey. Luffy observed, EHH? He's friends with Moon Guy? Quote. So it is Smoker? Quote. Maybe we should go over and join in the conversation. Our disguises are good, so it should be okay, Luffy said, as he began strolling towards the substitute Shinigami and the rear admiral. No. Wait. Usopp quickly slung a muscular arm over his friend's slender shoulders and pulled him close enough to whisper in his ear. We have to approach this more subtly. Subtly? Luffy questioned, tilting his head to the side. Like ninjas. Ninjas are amazing. Quote. Then ninjas it is. Usopp pulled Luffy down into a side street and shoved them both into the narrow alleyway, from where they continued to monitor Ichigo and Smoker's encounter. Nami and Zoro were about to leave the small area they'd been searching, when a brightly dressed figure coming from the opposite direction caught Nami's attention. Quickly, she pulled Zoro into a shop, from where they watched the figure cross the street. It's him, Nami breathed, it's Quillam. They watched as Quillam nimbly disappeared into a nearby building. Let's follow. Stealthily, the swordsman and navigator left the shop, crossed the street and entered the building, where they glimpsed the corner of Quillam's patterned orange robes disappearing into a room down a long hallway. They quietly traversed the hallway, where they waited. Sure enough, Quillam's voice soon sounded. It seems the Straw Hat Pirates chose a highly convenient time to come here, don't you think? Quote. Indeed, another voice sounded, on any island, particularly one with limited knowledge on the current state of matters, pirates really do make the perfect scapegoats. Blame anything that's wrong with the world on them and anyone would believe you. Who'd pick the word of any sort of pirate above that of the Emperor's oh-so-loyal right hand? Quote. Quillam snicked. Oh hey, you're flattering yourself. Well, who's the one who let those two pirates escape last night? Quote. I suppose it was a joint effort. Haha. Good point. Though none of that should matter either way. The Straw Hats will still look guilty. And by tomorrow, Shanpaio will be completely entrusted to us. Let's prepare to say our farewells to the dear old Emperor. They're going to frame us for an assassination? Nami questioned in distaste. Sounds like it, Zoro commented. We should to get back to the ship and warn the others. I don't like where this is going. Wishram exited the elaborate structure that was the main hall and descended to the sea nymph's quarters. He hefted a sigh. Shearwater was moody because Potoro was busy and therefore irritable. Nothing was enjoyable when the higher-ups were in foul moods. Worst part was that it put him in an even fouler mood than they were, and caused his fellow sea nymphs to either fear him if they were normal or tease him if they were idiots like Perseus. Brushing off Yingarna as she offered him something that resembled a variety of seaweed roll, he sat down by the fireplace and stared into the flames. I wonder, he pondered to himself, where things might go from here.
Unfortunately, this part is over. I hope you enjoyed it. Please have a good morning, afternoon, evening or night. See ya next time.